Green clip Evening, everybody, and welcome back. Just want to turn my camera on so I can say a proper hello to everyone. I hope you had a really nice, restful break. I sent you 2 messages on TLHE8412 saying that. So, how was your break? Let's hear. What did you do? And then I'll tell you the things that I got up. So let's do this. While you are typing, or you can unmute if you like. There's so few of us. You can just raise your hand if you want to speak. Or if you want to type in the chat box, that's fine also. And then, yeah, just say what you did during your break. I basically designed more pages for cars for you. And then I tried Wayground quiz. So I created a normal quiz. It was the easiest thing ever. And then I did that video quiz. I think it was Sonette in the last lecture who threw out the challenge to use a video quiz. So, like, what did you think of those? Any thoughts, any ideas? You can raise your hand, unmute, let's speak. Spent the holiday marking and looking after a newborn. I am so very sorry, Kavi. I noted down to send you a message, and somehow I think life just got away from me. So huge congratulations to you and your partner. What baby did you have, and what's the name? It's not easy studying, working, and a newborn. I can't even imagine what that was like, but lots of fun. And it goes really quickly. I'm sure everyone here who has little ones will agree. You blink your eye and they are 9 years old, and you try to think back to those days when they were little and well, not troublesome, but needed all that care and attention. And it's just like a blur somewhere in the back of your mind. Anybody else, while Kavi is giving us more details? Oh, there, Diana collaborated with my group and finished, wow, part 2 and assignment. So that's great. Well done. So yeah, part 2 was submitted and I've graded it and you've gotten your feedback. So yeah, there were no like real concerns that I noted. Even that ICE task 3, I was grading while you were on break. And I said, I'm not going to send any announcements or anything, but I couldn't help myself because they were just really so nicely done. So I felt that I had to say something. Peter caught up on some sleep through the marking breaks. Oh, yeah. We look forward to those little breaks in marking, but it's nice that you were able to catch up on sleep. I'm in desperate need of that. Goodness me. Kavi says a little girl, Ria, already a month old. Goodness me. I thought she was born in September. But okay, that's wonderful. Been a challenge to juggle everything but surviving. And I'm sure you are still on leave. So 31 August. Okay. So just a Virgo. Didn't quite make it for the Leo. I don't know if you like into star signs and that. Bhavna, we didn't hear from you. Surey, how was yours? Missed spring day by 27 minutes. Oh, wow. So you were at the hospital quite late in the night. Oh, imagine you would have had, yeah, 1st of September. But yeah, I mean, that's still okay. 31st of August. Close enough. Okay, while we're just waiting for whoever else to share their ideas and thoughts, and again, huge congratulations, Kavi. And yeah, I'm really glad that we are back and we've got exactly 5 weeks left. And you'll see how fast this time is going to go. And I'm sure now when you look back, it's so hard to believe that you've almost finished the whole year. And like there's just so little left. I think it's just like a little bit next year and then you're done. So yeah, it just goes really quickly. And anyway, okay, so I had this feedback on the slide for my students last year, and I don't think it's really necessarily relevant, Because what I noticed from last year's group to this year's group, application in terms of your discipline is much stronger this year. So you seem to have a better understanding of your particular disciplines, and you are applying more meaningfully to your particular discipline. So that's like quite well done. I just think sometimes a little bit of drilling down. I can remember on one submission, I put the questions why. So that's where it's very crucial to come in, and that's where the meaningful link gets made when you say why you are suggesting what you are suggesting. So if, for example, you say scenario-based learning will be suitable for marketing discipline, great, it will be. But now you must say why. And that's where that analytical critical thinking comes in. Then yes, and you can see here examples of what constitutes meaningful application to your discipline. So in the past, like what students would do is they will say, in the economics discipline, lecturers should use scenario-based learning and then just carry on speaking about what scenario-based learning is and so on. And, just throw in their discipline here and there and hoping that, it will make a link. But obviously it doesn't. Look at example 3. It's a very nice one. Integrating diverse perspectives and case studies in marketing coursework can make the discipline more relatable and appealing to a broader range of students. For instance, group projects that incorporate real people from all races and gender groups and people with disabilities can be incorporated into marketing scenarios. So can you see, it's telling you what, and it's telling you why, and it's telling you how. So that's the type of thing that you want to be doing. Then on this slide, I've just included examples of unnecessary context. So the last one, I think, especially in your first part, and I think I emphasized this quite a bit, so it didn't really happen much. But, like if, for example, they're asking you about preparing students for assessment, then it's quite tempting to first start off by saying, what is assessment? And then what is preparing students for assessment? And then you go into the how of doing it. But that's not that's when you're writing an essay, and we don't write essays. So here, because you've got such tight limitations in terms of word counts and page numbers, you've got to go straight for the jugular, straight into the meat. You can't still first go and pick away at the fur and then the skin and then go down to the next level. You just go straight down to the next level. Casey Lee, good evening and welcome. It's no worry that you're late. I am recording. I was just speaking a little bit about some feedback from your submissions, and it's feedback that I compiled last year, but I thought I'll just share it with you this year as well, because some of it might be relevant. There wasn't anything really specific that I can say was problematic about any submission. It's just making that crucial extra link. So I want to go back to learning unit 4 because we went through it before you went off on break. So I wanted to go back and go into a little bit more detail and also just do like a little recap this evening, of course, with more detail before we move on to the last bit of the module. So learning unit 4, if you will remember, is managing the assessment process. And the first theme is managing assessment in different roles. So to get started, I have, a relatively non-complex question. If you can just throw some responses into the chat, please. Which different role players are involved in assessment? So yeah, whichever you can think of. Doesn't have to be all, but whichever ones come to the top of your mind. I'll give you 3 minutes, and if you can just type some responses in the chat box, please. Just while you're doing that, I should announce I have new internet, by the way. I got rid of the Telcom, and then now I'm trying AfriHost, which seems to be working fine as long as I'm downstairs. But as soon as I go upstairs, then it seems to start being problematic again. So I'm in communication with them about that, but I just thought I'll let you know. That also happened during the break. Okay, so yeah, great. I think the responses that came through have kind of hit it on the head. It's the student, whoever is developing the assessment, the marker. And then, as Peter also said, legislative organizations, the institution management, he just summed up all those people, Kavi, the faculty head, the head academic, so on and so on. I found it interesting that you said class assessments like mentors and tutors and so on. Um, and I found this interesting because I remember when I was a tutor, we didn't at first have any role in assessments. Nothing. We would just unpack content. We didn't even prepare students for assessments. And then slowly, as the role evolved, I insisted on contributing to the assessment questions. Like, I know the students and I know the content and I know what should be asked, so I should play a role. And then subsequently, we also got more involved in preparing students for assessments. So yes, definitely agree. And then Kavi made a good point because most everyone is involved in different ways in assessments to some extent. Okay. So I have on the slide, assessment is a complex process involving many role players. Oh, geez, and I even had examples on there. And I said to myself, I mustn't do that. And it's exactly what I did. Such as students, tutors, lecturers, and managers. Each role player has a unique role to play to promote an effective assessment system. It's therefore important to both understand your role as lecturer in the system as well as how your role relates to the other role players. And of course, it differs from institution to institution. So at some institutions, as the lecturer, you are responsible for everything pertaining to your assessment development, administering, collecting, providing feedback, arranging moderation. You do everything. And then at other institutions, such as ours, we don't, when I'm talking about ours, I'm speaking about Emirates. We don't design assessments, it gets designed, developed centrally. We mark, we grade, and then the operations team handles the moderation part and then provides the lecturers with feedback through the faculty heads. So it also just depends on the different institutions. I forgot to ask, I just threw it in there now. What do you think of the new name? You are now students at Emirates. What do you think of the new name? So let's just pause there and get your thoughts. I mean, it was quite a big change that happened. If anybody wants to unmute and talk, that's fine also. I think those are very good sources of input for assessment methods and a more authentic feedback of how the students view the assessments. I plead the fifth. Kavi, I'm going to assume that you're speaking about the role players in assessment. Let's leave that there. Anybody else have any thoughts on the name change? I know there's a joke going around, and that is like when you tell, and I promise you this actually did happen to me. You're never going to believe it. But somebody asked me, like, so where do you work? And I said, oh, well, I'm in education. I work for Emirates. And they're like, oh, like, do you teach pilots or and I had such a good laugh. I said, no, not Emirates, Emirates. So I know that that is a bit of a joke that's going around. Going to make it such, oh yes, 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 that I am studying at an higher education institute of college. Most definitely, the varsity college was just so confusing. Like, is it a university or is it a college? So yes, I love that about the new name. It also looks quite nice. So yeah. Um, it is definitely more advantageous. Okay, please don't stop sharing your ideas. If you're still typing, don't stop. Please send it through still. But in the meantime, let's move on to look at marking and academic judgment, which is theme 2. And I've got here, why is marking in higher education often unreliable? What are your thoughts about that? And then if your surname starts with any letter between A and M, please could you provide an explanation of norm-referenced approaches to marking? And if your surname starts with any letter from N to Z, then please explain criterion reference approaches to marking. So you don't have to explain both. It just depends on your surname. And then the final question here is, why is criterion referenced assessment regarded as desirable? So there's three questions for you to look at here, and I'll give you 8 minutes to answer them. So, well, not answer, well, provide your ideas. I don't want to say answer them because that then almost implies like I'm going to put a tick and a cross, red and green. But it's not quite that. It's just your thoughts and it's sharing of ideas, and also giving me the opportunity to see who's been doing their reading and who hasn't. No, I'm just kidding. It really just is, for us to reach shared understanding and so on. So it's now 7:52. By 8 p.m., if you could please have posted responses to these questions. And if you're still speaking about the name change, please carry on doing so. Okay, great. Thank you for these very wonderful ideas that you've shared. Peter, I really liked what you said here about when assessments are developed centrally and then sent to the lecturer. You don't know what to expect until it comes. And then when it comes, like, it's already done now. So you have to just kind of go with what you have, and hope that whatever feedback you provide will be considered for the next one. So yes, it definitely has disadvantages, but I think in terms of trying to achieve consistency and standardization, and in some way, I suppose, quality, then that might be a better route to go. But I always feel like, I don't know, this has always been my idea. Like, I've done a lot of development, I still do. And whenever I almost want to email all the lecturers and say, I'm busy with this development, send me your ideas for questions. And sort of then lecturers also have ownership of the assessment and the process. And then it becomes also more relevant because sometimes, as the developer, you're teaching your group of students, but you don't know what's going on with the other groups of students in other contexts. So I always sort of want to do that. And I'm actually thinking maybe for the next one that I do, I am actually going to do just that and see what comes out of it, almost like a community of practice for developing an assessment might work better. Um, I will come to norm and criterion referenced just now. Um, Diana, marking in higher education is often unreliable because a marker's overall impression of a paper can influence their assessment of individual criteria, and that can lead to inconsistent application of the rubric, definitely. And how different lecturers, as much as rubrics are meant to promote objectivity and so on, there's still a lot of room in any assessment type for subjectivity, unless, of course, it's like your numeracy type modules. And then Kavi says, fatigue. Oh, yes, definitely. Fatigue could go one of two ways. So when you're experiencing marker fatigue, it could be, oh my goodness, I just want to hurry up and get these done. Let them do really well. Or it could be, geez, I'm so tired. I'm so frustrated right now. How could they have written this? Like, what were they thinking? I did not teach them this. And then you end up being a bit harsh on the students. So generally, if you're feeling tired and even if you're chasing a marking deadline, I'd say stop. Like, I would stop. I would not mark. So my approach generally is, no matter what the load is, I read through all the submissions first, not in detail. I mean, like for a smaller group, yes, I can read in a bit more detail. But I mean, if I have 50 students, then I'm going to like skim through all the submissions first before I even attach a single mark. So I first read through all and then I close it, and I might leave it for a day. And then I just let the natural process of marination happen. So, everything gets into there and shifts its way around and makes its connections and all the schema and everything that happens in our great big brains. And then when I'm ready to mark, then somehow everything is there. Not everything, but like, I have an idea and a gist, and I know basically what everyone is saying. So then it's a lot more standardized. I find that works for me. And then marking actually goes quicker because I've already sort of seen everything. So it's not like, oh, it's the first time I'm seeing it and it's the first time I'm going through it. But yes, as I was saying, if you are experiencing fatigue, then stop and rather get an extension or get someone to help with the marking. And that's something else that I do not favor. No matter how busy I am, I know the one year when I was relocating, the day that I relocated was the day that my course students submitted their summative assignment. So everybody said, no, just get marking assistants and then, have that done. And I said, no, I don't like to do that. I like to mark my own assessments because then I can see exactly what happened here. And then it helps with developing future assessments. Like if you go back to when I first started teaching these modules, and if you look at what the assessments look like, then it's been a complete evolution. And that only happens from marking your own students' work. So I also prefer that rather get an extension. And then you say interpersonal conflicts. Look, I think as lecturers, there's ethical standards involved, and you can't let anything affect a mark that you award to a student. If a student has worked and earned the mark, you've got to give them the mark. Because you had a difference of opinion in a class discussion, for example, or maybe something they wrote in the assessment you don't quite like, it shouldn't then, totally cause anything for the student. There's an ethical standard, like school teachers have SACE. We also have to maintain that standard. Incompetence, inexperience, most definitely, unclear marking guidelines, and then inconsistencies between similar submissions, and then human error. Yeah, most definitely. I mean that's a factor. We've all made mistakes, especially, before when we used to get hard submissions and we had to mark in red pen. Calculation errors were huge. At least nowadays we do everything online because my math is not very good. And then you spoke about norm referenced and then why criterion based. Students' performance is compared to the norm group to determine their mark. Okay, so that would be norm reference. So basically, criterion reference marking is most often preferred because students' performance is judged against a specific predefined set of standards of what they know and what they can do. And it provides a more clear feedback on the mastery of their skills. And then it gives them also an idea of the areas where they need to improve. And then on the other hand, you get the norm referenced where they are just, as Diana said, ranked against their peers in norm reference marking. So that is why, and I see here everyone said more or less the same thing. Criterion-based marking is actually preferable in higher education. It takes away all these things that Kavi and Peter and Diana have said about why marking in higher education is sometimes unreliable. So criterion-based referencing is assessment. Criterion referenced assessment is more preferable. Okay. Now, feedback, as you know, I've mentioned this before, is very, very, very important, especially in online. And I'm sure you've noticed this as well. Getting good, useful feedback can definitely make a difference in your future submissions. So, why do you think providing students with feedback is one of the most important aspects in the assessment process? And how will you use feedback to help students understand what they need to do to improve their achievements in assessment? So, just two questions. You can answer both, or you can pick one to answer. I mean, that's up to you. But I would like to see everybody, share their ideas about feedback. And then, of course, when you speak assessment, there's a whole range of authors. I should actually put myself here also because in February, my colleague and I published a paper on lecturers' perceptions of feedback in higher education in online distance learning environments. And what we found was that all the lecturers who participated in the study said that they provided meaningful feedback to their students. They felt that the feedback that they provided to their students was meaningful. But so after receiving those responses from them, we had focus groups, and in the focus groups, we heard all these examples and ideas, and so it was quite exciting. We then set out now to do an analysis of the feedback. So we selected a sample of 10 lecturers who participated in the focus groups, and we went to analyze their feedback. And then we had to extend our sample because in that 10, we couldn't, in some instances, even find any feedback, let alone meaningful feedback. Then we checked another 5, and the same thing happened. And then our entire study shifted from analyzing meaningful feedback to the misconception of what constitutes meaningful feedback. And then it also goes back to that whole thing about teachers' beliefs of their practice. So that I also made reference to that in one of my dissertations, is how teachers or lecturers perceive or believe how they teach as opposed to how they actually teach. So that's why like peer and peer mentoring programs and peer observations and so on are so important, because very often, it's that whole Johari window, like where you can't actually see what you can't see. So yeah, I think anyway, what I was saying was, yes, so how lecturers perceive their feedback and what their feedback actually is was two very different things. So in that paper, there's also quite a bit of information on feedback and providing effective feedback. And then we took it to the next step where we designed a template. Okay, now this is very interesting. We designed this cover page sort of template, and my colleague designed it at first and sent it to me, and now ready, obviously, to share with the lecturers so that they can start implementing it. And when I looked at it, then I put myself in a lecturer's position, and I thought, if I'm going to use this, if I'm even going to see this, I will want to cry. So I converted it into almost like a rubric that lives on Arc. So you attach it as a third rubric, the first being your referencing rubric, the second being your marking rubric, and then the third one, which is this one, being your feedback rubric. And it has all the different layers of feedback that Hattie and Simply propose. I can't remember them all now. In fact, I can't even remember one right now. And we took the lecturers through this wonderful session where we, highlighted the importance of feedback and showed them that in, many instances, their feedback was a bit lacking and deficient, and why it's important for students to get this feedback. And in that, before I come to the next part, the thing that stood out to me a lot was one of the lecturers said, yes, it's all good and well for us to spend all, this time, giving students this feedback. But how do we even know that they are using the feedback? How do we know that they are accessing and using the feedback? Yes, ARC does show you if feedback was read, but reading feedback and using feedback meaningfully is not the same thing. So that's a whole other aspect of closing the loop on feedback. But just to come back to the cover sheet that we designed. So it was really a wonderful concept, to have this third rubric, and then as lecturers are giving marks and they pop into there and they populate it with feedback. And I imagined lecturers would create feedback banks and things like that, and then it becomes really simple. To date, not one person, not one single lecturer. Okay, I know one who attempted it, and he messaged me via WhatsApp telling me, I'm trying to slay this marking dragon, hope you're well. And I'm like, what a strange message to receive just out of the blue. So I said, oh, that's really great. Yeah, we all have those marking dragons, but yes, keep going. And then he said, yeah, going on with this cover page, it's taking a bit longer. And then I had to just say, you know what, I think rather just skip the cover page and get on with how you would normally go about your marking. And that was the only lecturer who attempted to even use the cover page. So the reality is, and I think this is where I'm going to with this, and I know I gave a lot of context and background here, but I wanted you to fully understand the complexity. Whilst it's very easy to say provide effective feedback, start with something positive, then give something developmental, and then give an action plan to improve. And in order to properly break down those three aspects and go into the level of detail that Hattie and Timperley prescribe is almost impossible. So that's what that cover page exercise revealed, that as much as we want to and earnestly endeavor, we have to have other strategies for providing meaningful feedback. And one way that I found really effective is automated grading. So tasks where students will complete and then receive automated, immediate, meaningful feedback. But then, of course, the loop needs to be closed there. Like, what are they then going to do with that feedback? So, maybe something like submitting a journal or a reflection piece or something, about the feedback that they received might be good. But that also then, it's two ways. I'm going to give and then you're going to take and then you're going to have to give back. So there's no guarantee that that's going to necessarily work. Okay, so I've spoken a lot. But yeah, I just thought those insights might help you understand so that when you are compiling your assessment plan, then whatever you're suggesting is not going to be too onerous and it's going to be doable. Peter says, I believe that feedback is a space where the greatest learning and transformation can take place. I have found that students are the most hungry for feedback, however, very difficult with large groups. I also see that corporate feedback for the whole group is confusing for students, often with strong students second guessing or weaker ones overestimating their submission. I definitely agree with this, Peter, everything that you have said here. But in the absence of other, I still think one of the best ways to reach students possibly and give the more detailed feedback is in a group submission. And I think that students need to be realistic. What you have put into that submission. So what your input is, and generally roughly whereabouts you are. So yeah, but it is difficult because sometimes students do think like, look, this is the mark that I achieved. They aren't able to separate themselves from the group. Which is why it's important, and I'm realizing this now and might add this layer for next year, for there to be in-group submissions an individual component where students provide feedback or a reflection on the assessment. So I think adding that layer might help with that complexity. And then the other part that you've said, yes, most definitely students are very hungry for feedback. I remember as a student submitting and then literally hanging around outside the staff room door waiting for my lecturer so I could ask them, when will we get our submissions back? And back when I did my B.Ed honors at UKZN, the lecturers used to check our drafts. So if you completed your work, a draft, I think it was 2 weeks, not less than 2 weeks before the submission date, the lecturer would actually take your draft and give you feedback on the draft. And like we were indeed very, very hungry for that feedback. And I think partly also to hear good things about what you've done. As much as we want it to be, constructive and tell us how to improve, it's nice also to see the things that you've done well. Just a side thought, numerical marks for assessment, content lens, submission lens, feedback detail. It always feels like we too often infer quantity as quality. Most definitely, Kavi, what you are saying is 100% correct. And that's why those qualitative feedback comments are so important. I wonder though, they are rubrics. So do the rubrics actually not give enough guidance in terms of feedback? in terms of telling you, okay, you got a 6 to 7 because this is what you did. But then I think what happens is that a student is not able to see why they didn't get the 8 to 9 or 8 to 10, sorry. Like, why are they in this group, not that group? Like, I'm sure I did everything. They aren't able to see where their shortfall is, which is why it's then important for the lecturer to provide a specific comment for each rubric criteria. Yeah, that will take huge amounts of time also. Telling them why they missed more effective than telling them why they got the 6 to 7. Yes, most definitely. Although it would depend sometimes, yeah, but no, most definitely what you are saying is correct also. Showing them how to get better rather than telling them where they went wrong. Sometimes you do also need to just say, like, okay, so yeah, we've spoken quite a bit about feedback. So you can just reflect on these questions. I do want to move forward. Why do you think providing students with feedback is one of the most important aspects in the assessment process? And I think we spoke about all of this here, especially when Peter said it's the space where the greatest learning and transformation can take place if done and received effectively. Yeah. And then how will you use feedback to help students understand what they need to do to improve their achievements in assessment? And there's so many strategies that can be implemented. So even, and I know a lot of lecturers are doing voice notes. So they are recording as they marking, then they record themselves speaking. And I think that's also might work instead of typing, But sometimes I find, and this is why I don't like to send voice notes in general, I speak and then I end up saying things that I don't necessarily want to say. So 5 minutes into the voice notes, I end up throwing it into the bin and then I just end up typing the message. So, yeah, it's a tricky one, but you've got to see what works best for you and your constraints, I suppose. Diana says, I feel that feedback provides students with guidance to improve, clarifies learning objectives, and the gap between the current understanding and the desired outcome. It motivates them to identify their strengths and areas for development. Most definitely, Diana, and that is indeed what you have said encapsulates, why feedback is so important and necessary. So yes, thank you for sharing that. That's most definitely everything that feedback needs to do. So we work towards getting there, and hopefully we will. And sometimes you'll have bigger gaps in your time than others. But the one thing that I find does work are feedback banks, but that's for overall feedback. For specific comments, it's a lot harder because, everyone's submission, although it has a lot of commonalities, and it's also quite different. Okay, so that's feedback. Just make sure, like I said, whatever you're suggesting in your assessment plan is aligned, firstly, with your discipline, with the assessment that you have developed, and then also it must be doable. Whatever you're suggesting. Okay. So moderation, we spoke about in our last lecture. If you remember, I just wanted to recap on it. Effective moderation, why is it important? And as we said, it was for standardization and achieving consistency. And in the past, it used to be also to find errors in marking. And I think perhaps even now, sometimes there might be errors in marking, not so much in calculations anymore. I remember once doing moderation on a set of scripts, and it was a particularly tricky assessment. It was this module that was called Introduction to Scholarship A. Oh, I remember that module. But the assessment was like quite tricky in terms of calculation because one question I'm trying to remember, okay? So one question, let's say, was out of 20 marks, and then the second question was also 20 marks, but you had to divide it by 2. And then there was a third question that was out of something, and a fourth question that also had another layer of complexity, depending on which one the student answered. So it was quite calculation finicky. And the one batch that I did, and it was a lecturer who actually taught, I think, 8 groups of this module on her particular campus. And she just didn't get that calculation right. And all those students, all those submissions, all those assessments, I had to remark and I had to recalculate. I spent hours, and it's obviously got to be scanned. It was no online submissions in those days, so it was those terribly scanned copies. I still remember, oh my goodness, I wanted to cry. But at the end of it, I think what I learned from it was, firstly, why moderation is so important, but also just to keep calculations and marking and rubrics in assessment as simple as possible. Like, I have seen rubrics that have like 6, 7 descriptives, 0 to 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 7, 8 to 9. And I'm thinking to myself, but why? Why? Combine them. Generally 3 to 5 is more than enough. 5, I think, is even too much. I generally like 3. But it depends on the module, obviously, and the assessment. But yeah, like, you try and keep it as simple as possible. It makes it easy for the marker and the student and the moderator. Okay, and then the differences and purposes of internal and external moderation we spoke about. Internal moderation is more for standardization, to improve and develop markers, and then external moderation is more checking that everything is right. Okay, and then describe any moderation process that you were familiar with. I think in that lecture, everybody did basically come up with this process, if I'm not mistaken. Pre-marking moderation, then you mark, then feedback on your marking, and then a final cross-check of marking, and then any changes that are needed to be done to the grades. If that's the case. But generally, if that pre-marking, if you have a good standardization call with all the lecturers, and you discuss everything about the assessment and the rubrics and different possibilities, and everyone brings their own expertise to the table, and then you do that pre-marking moderation where everybody marks the same 3 scripts. And then you have a call and you do a discussion of that. Generally, there shouldn't be a situation at the end where marks will need to be changed, because everyone will then be more or less aligned. So moderation is absolutely important, for, standardization and all those other reasons. Okay, are there any questions or anything that you'd like to add? Anything that I've left out? Or just any observations that you've made, or anything that you find interesting or noteworthy or not interesting. If you are all good, you can give a thumbs up. If you're not going to be adding anything or no questions, you can just give me a thumbs up, then I can see. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Peter. Kavi, go ahead. You can unmute and ask. Thank you, Bhavna. Thank you, Surey. Kavi, was that a thumbs up? I thought you raised your hand. Okay, yeah, I've done that quite a few times. And then, like, a lot of times I forget to put my hand down. And then people say, is that a historical hand? And I go, yes, it's an historical hand. I'm really sorry. No, that's all good. Okay, no, great. So, where to now? Obviously, you're going to complete Learning Unit 4. We're more or less done with it. You can just tie it up and then move on. And then please commence now part 3 of your POE. In fact, from what I know of this group, I have a suspicion that everybody has probably already by now started part 3. In some form or other. The recording is uploaded. If anything is not clear, then you can just let me know via email and we can chat. But yes, so I will see you next week for CURS, and then the following week for TLHA again. And so we're back to normal now. Okay, so have a lovely evening and all the best with whatever you're working on at the moment. And yeah, I'm available via email, so please don't hesitate to contact me. Okay, everybody, good night. Thanks for attending. Bye bye.